Just like to call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock, the Board of Finance with special meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education present. This is kind of our meeting, but at the end, we have to do 2 items of business, the last 2 items on the agenda that handed out, so those are the only 2 things we have to do, our board, but other than that, it's for a 3 board to go over. So if we could, I'd like to all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What we're going to try to do here is have a meeting of all 3 boards to just talk about the budget before we really get into the total budget process. And our board already had a discussion on it last month, just kind of going through some indicators, and I handed that out in your package, some of the items we've been looking at and just some of the historical facts that we see. So I thought it'd be good, after talking to Mary and Matt, that maybe we sit down and chat before we get into the budget process, and before people formulate opinions, that we just kind of listen to all the boards and listen to some of their concerns, listen to some of their drivers of the budgets, listen to cost savings. We've been trying to work on cost savings. Maybe you can hear from us some of the areas we've been working on to try to help for the budgets. We'll kind of articulate those so you don't hear a third hand, so we can ask questions, and so people can sit around face to face and just kind of chat about the budget, and so everyone can get a better understanding, so they don't form a position premature, so to speak. So with that, I don't know if everyone in their package, I'd handed out what we did, our board did last month, a little preliminary items where we started off talking about our budget goals. And it kind of goes through the budget goals, goes through financial indicators, estimates that impact the budget, comparison, 5-year numbers, budget items to consider, and thoughts on the budget process, timetable. So what I'd like to do is just, maybe we could just go to the goals. Basically, we set goals last year for the first time, and one of our leading goals was to lower or to keep the mill rate as low as possible. If not, keep it flat, keep it with a reasonable range, to try to be more competitive to other towns. So that was the genesis of that, to try to do something about our mill rate. Obviously, we want to maintain AAA rating. We've always kept the debt service under 7%. We had a little issue with Simsbury Farms, so we're trying to solve that. We've had a committee going on for the last year, or seems like a year, 6 months, right? And obviously, long-term financial fiscal discipline. We set up long-range planning that we started. On the indicators, the one indicator that I tend to look at is the Social Security, or the COLA for the seniors, and that's basically 1.7%. I think last year was 1.5, and this year it's now 1.7. So I believe in January the seniors all get a raise of about 1.7%. So that's just some thoughts to keep in mind. Unemployment rate, I guess Connecticut's still not as good as national average. I'm not sure Simsbury. AAA borrowing costs are still low, which is good. And on 173 housing permits, that the indicators are that things are getting more active in our town. And, you know, we had grand list growth last year, so the indicators are that Simsbury is a lot more is going on. Also, last year in estimates, we changed the collection rate assumption. You know, and that's something you can't do every year. You can only do that about once every 10 years, because I think we've done it 2 or 3 times since I've been on, and we're up to 98.5%. I'm not sure our board's going to want to go much more on that, but we haven't really discussed it, but we will discuss it. But last year we knew we had to do something. This year I'm not sure we do. Capital non-recurring, obviously we have the numbers in there and what you get, so you'll know what the numbers are. We're trying to set up a new account. I call it a spend to save. Just give it a name, but it's a capital non-recurring account. If you can spend some, if we give you some money and you spend it and it saves you on your budget, we'll put it through what's called a capital non-recurring account. And we might set it up so there'll be a small payback, not like the current one where there's a 20%. We have not adopted that yet. We've been just talking about it, but it's in the works to do something there. And so it's an interesting way of helping you with your budgets to get some savings. And we're basically using reserves to do that, not take it out of current budget, but out of reserves. So obviously the debt service levels and rates, we're going to keep it under 7%, which we were in the past. Pension and OPEB rates of returns, we changed those 2 years ago, and they're consistent. I don't believe those are going to change. I don't think there's any movement to change those, and that's impacts your budgets also. Overhead allocations, that's the one we're talking about, Simsbury Farms, back to the Board of Selectmen. If we do, what the recommendation is, some money will be put back and will be pushed into their budget. And they'll have to absorb more to offset Simsbury Farms' deficit there. Use of internal service funds favorability. Now this one's an interesting one. Basically, we have in the insurance side, a self-insurance fund that has about a $5.7 million fund balance. I'm not sure what it is as of June 30th, 14.
Oh, 5.2.
5.2, so it lost a little bit this year, but it's 5.2. And by listening to our advisors, that's probably more than we need. So the question is, how do we use that? So we're trying to come up with ways so you can use it either A, to direct budget savings, or B, we'll just budget for it as a revenue item, taking a certain amount. We're not going to take the whole difference, but we'll take something like 10%. And I figured there's about $2.5–3 million of excess amount in there. 10% would be $250,000 to $300,000 of savings. We got to figure out how to use that somehow. So we'll be working on that. So that's something to keep in mind. Amount of reserves. I think we're going to hand out our reserve policy. We adopted a new reserve policy. We didn't have one, but we adopted one. Our board did. And we talk about what we do with excess, what we consider a normal reserves. So I think Joe will hand that out so you can see that. We're not going to talk about it, but it just, we came up with 12% as a number for reserves, which we are at. And then what will we do with the excess? So,
What kind of reserves are you talking about, Peter? When you make that statement, what kind of reserves?
good question. These are unassigned reserves, not designated or committed reserves. In the accounting terminology, it's unassigned reserves. So basically, we're at 12%, and we want to keep it at 12. So you can see in the last budget cycle, we used some to pay what I call cash for capital. This year, to take pressure off the budget. So we've used the money to solve Simsbury Farms' problem. We have the ability to use the money in various aspects. We're not going to use it directly for operating budgets, but indirectly to take pressure off, and we can use it to do that. We'll put it over to, if we have an unfunded obligation, into pension or OPEB, we can put money there at the end of the year. So we kind of articulate what we're willing to do with the money if we're over the 12% in this policy. So that's something new.
I think, Peter, we had a 10% minimum.
Yeah.
So
we
a range.
need to clarify, the minimum reserve level that we're shooting for is 10%, and we'd like to keep it in that 10 to 12% range, but as Peter indicated, once you get over 12%, it starts giving us some flexibility to do some other things.
Right. I mean, if we have storms and all of a sudden it takes it down like we had a few years ago, then we're not flexible. Once we're having good years, no storms, no problems, we can be more flexible like this past year. I thought we were pretty flexible. Most flexible I can recall we've been in a long time. So
Can I just do?
for us to be flexible.
Just one other related thought. The top bullet on the page you're looking at there, with the collection rate assumptions, as Peter said, we've moved from 98 to 98.5 on the assumptions we use for budgeting purposes. In fact, we typically are up, Joe, where are we, at 99.6 or so?
Yeah, a little slightly under, but yes.
But very often, we have a full percentage point of excess that goes into the reserve. So the reserve is being built with the fact that we're collecting more than we assume for budgeting purposes, and that's what allows us to build up the reserve and then gives us the flexibility to take care of problems or other things that we want to do from time to time, as
Right.
as we've gone through the years, so.
It's hard to budget 100%.
Yeah.
But, so I think 98.5, we're probably one of the highest budget and collection rates of all towns in the state. But, it does give us the ability, because our taxpayers pay, which is good. So we've been fortunate with that, so it helps us out. Couple other things we just gave you, how do we compare? We looked at how we compare against other AAA. We had a whole detailed schedule. This is in words, how it is, plus or minus, for your reading. And then I go to mill rate worksheet. This is the magic worksheet that we do at the end of the year. And this is last year's worksheet, how it ended up. So this is where we put everything in and we do what-if scenarios. And if you notice, the total appropriations went up 1.04% last year. And yet, I guess non-public schools was small, Board of Ed was down there. We actually went backwards on debt retirement because we didn't go up to the 7%. We kept it at like 6.78%. So we were able to keep the overall appropriations at 1.04%. Believe it or not, we had some growth in indirect revenues, which tend to be, it wasn't interest income last year. We projected more on building permits, things like that. It went up. Tax relief gave us some pickup. We had less tax relief we had to give out. And the grant list grew by 0.9%. So overall, we had revenue growth, which is pretty good. This year, believe it, we don't know what our revenue growth is. The indicators are that we should have some. Wouldn't you say, Mary? I mean, the indicators would.
Yeah, it's significant. I think there's a lot of new development coming online, and the Hartford is actively marketing, so I expect we'll get some news from them too.
But we won't know till the assessor doesn't have to file the formal assessment list of February 1. So we'll know February 1st what that, or have an indicator what it is. So until then, it's just talk. So by then, we'll have some harder numbers. But the indicators are, it looks good. Also in that area, we've, maybe I'll go through it in another slide, but Joe's worked a lot on our interest policy. We have a lot of not investable, but excess funds that we have to be conservative how we invest it because we need them to be liquid. And typically, we've invested them in state areas,
Short-term incentive fund.
Yeah, the STIF
Run by the
fund,
state.
right, which gets us 0.1% of 1%. We've got other ways to do it without taking risk and to get us a higher return, so we're going to probably be budgeting more in interest this year. The extent what it is, we don't know yet, but it's probably going to be better.
Peter, can I just clarify?
Sure.
You used the phrase excess funds, and I saw a bunch of eyes light up. It's really the reserve that can get invested, the money that's sitting in reserve.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have, basically our reserves are, what, 11 million? Unassigned reserves, $11 million.
Yeah, but he has little piles of money all over the place. What did you say was, you're investing about 25, right?
No. We can only invest basically what's in the general fund, so call it 10 million. But yes, there is 25 million out there.
Yeah, okay.
Well, also, people pay taxes twice a year, so but you have needs for that money and short-term needs, so you can't go buy one-year CDs or anything like that. But you can with the other money that maybe we don't have the short-term needs. So we're trying to look to get some more income there to help out everyone there, too. The next couple of slides are just revenue, 5 years. Here's what we've gotten in revenue with taxes. It's just a 5-year for your information, and the expenditures by the boards in the debt retirement for the last 5 years. On the next slide. CNR. We should also, you can see what we've gotten for CNR. You got the town and the Board of Ed, what they've gotten the last 2 years. There was some confusion about that number, but we want to make it clear what that number is. And I believe for the town, it's the 416,250, and the Board of Ed, 570,500. That's the number we've used the last 2 years after we increased the fund 2 years ago. Now, if we do this other capital non-recurring, that will be in addition, and that's not considered use for here. So if we do anything for spend to save, that will be considered different. But, so this is the parameters, and as you know, when you spend this money, 20% of it comes back in your budget, so you're paying it back. It's just, you know, a short-term loan to get your equipment on a more level spending. That's basically what we've been doing there. And I think it's worked quite well. The next slide is Simsbury Farms. That's just to show you why it was an issue for us. We had deficit spending, and we've taken money out of reserves and gotten rid of the deficits this past year. And with the solution that we have, it should come to, between what they've done in the fiscal year they're in now and proposed changes for next year, they should be able to offset that $187,000 loss. So we have, I think, a good proposal that will make it work. The bad side of it is the Board of Selectmen have to absorb $90,000 in their budget to make it work, so. Bonding, we're still gonna probably stay with 10-year notes. The interest rate's 2.15, still low, which is good. This current year, we're gonna bond in the spring, probably do $5 million. So if we do $5 million, our debt service will probably drop even more than it was last time, so we'll probably have a decrease again. Once we get closer to that, we'll know what that number is, so we'll know probably by February what that number is. So the debt service could go down even more. I don't think it's gonna, you know, $5 million basically on a 10-year payback is $500,000 plus the cost of interest. So 2% on $5 million is 100, so it's about $600,000. I think there's about a 680 drop off if you look at the footnotes. So we'll probably spend about 80,000 less in debt service. It's not going to be a dramatic number, but it's still a favorable. Budget items to consider, you know, for the Board of Selectmen, the Simsbury Farms, if we put 90,000 back in their budget, they have to absorb 90,000 out of the gate, which is putting it back in their fund. We'll change the way we look at it, so comparing apples, we'll put it in as if it was in the beginning of the year, so comparative wise, you know, if we come up with a percent or whatever percent they want to do, this doesn't come into play because it's really just changing how it's budgeted. Collection rate, talking about the 98.5 areas of savings. We've already talked about the medical insurance, spend to save. Unexpected education fund account, that's a statute that's out there. It's probably for your board, the Board of Ed, to consider. And basically, it's a way to take unspent money, put it in this, like a continued appropriation account. It's the only way I know how to describe it. So it doesn't go back to fund balance, but it kind of stays as a fund balance, still controlled by your board, and then you can use it in the following year to offset costs, if you want. But if you turn it back, it goes in the general fund. This way, it doesn't go in the general fund. So you can't do it for the Board of Selectmen. The statute is clear, it's just Board of Ed, because people have said, gee, why don't we do it Board of Selectmen, and we're not picking on you. It's just, that's the way the statute is, and there's no statute to do that for the Board of Selectmen. So then the change in interest income policy, we've changed that so we can probably earn some more money without taking risk, and more to come on what that number will look like. So that's basically what we've been doing and talking about. So if you want, maybe Mary wants to go first, or Matt, whoever wants to go first, just kind of chat about drivers in your budget or what you see this year, or
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for organizing. I'll turn the meeting over to Joe. We just basically went through a couple of things that we know are going to happen that folks should be aware of that would have a significant impact on the budget going forward. And Matt and I have spent a lot of time talking together about drivers that affect each of our budgets individually and opportunities that we've been working on. Obviously, the savings and the insurance consolidation took a long time for us to put into effect. We had to negotiate contract changes. We had to coordinate joint bidding. But as you saw last year, the amount that the savings provided were significant. One of the things that we know is going to happen right now is the governor is cutting $10 million from state aid from municipalities directly. it's going to be a mid-year cut. It'll come to us probably in January, and we don't know where it's going to come, whether it'll come through education cost-sharing funding, roads. So we're waiting to find out. But that will have a definite impact in this year's budget, and with the state deficit, we know we'll have a significant impact.
What percent do you think, I mean, that 10 million is in total to all towns?
All towns, but it's unclear as to how it's going to be allocated, so we don't know if it'll be equal among each town, or whether it'll be a percentage, which means Simsbury obviously would have a less of an impact. So at this point, we don't know, but that we know we're going to be cut in this fiscal year. So, and we know.
The governor's budget, though.
In the governor's budget.
The legislature has to agree to that.
Well, it's unclear, legally, the town.
We're talking about this coming year.
The governor has
Yes,
rescission,
you're right.
rescission authority. So, legally, the governor can cut a certain percent,
Yes.
whether
Yeah.
towns are going to fight it. I don't know what that will get us, because if we fight it this time, we'll just be right back in next year's budget. So, but everyone should be aware of it. We're aware of it. We're monitoring it. Something that we know is going to be a problem for next year. There's a lot of unknowns. It's early. It's just December, so there's a lot of unknowns in terms of revenue projections. And I'll just have Joe walk through, just to highlight a couple of big major areas that we're watching.
You should follow a similar theme. The expenses, what we expect to have hit us this year. Early indication is health insurance is going to go up 10%. This is obviously very early in the process, but on the town side, if we see that happen, that's about $240,000. Next is Simsbury Farms. So Simsbury Farms, as we stated earlier, they've had continuing deficits year after year. The Simsbury Farms subcommittee is going to make the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance for the Board of Selectmen budget to absorb $90,000 a year of their overrun. We'll be meeting before the next Board of Selectmen meeting and ultimately presenting at some point in January. Pension arc, what we're seeing right now is there's a potential of it going up about 10% year over year. It's not necessarily a large amount, but it's definitely material. Contractual increases, we have contracts that are on the table. Most of them are right around the 2%. There's the unsettled one with the police department. No reason to expect anything outside of the 2%. On the revenue side, just the next slide. As Mary said, state aid reductions. Early indication from CCM, this is actually the municipal revenue sharing account, which we had about $70,000 in. So that is at risk for this year. I'll keep you guys updated as changes are made, but right now there's nothing concrete. Hartford uncertainty, we don't see anything happen in the next 12 months, but I can't be 100% sure on that. And then grand list, early indications is that it's probably going up. As Peter mentioned earlier, there's a lot of building permits that have been issued. We'd like to see another grand list growth of 1%, but again, you don't know when these items are going to come online. That's all I had on the Board of Selectmen side.
Could you, just on the pension arc piece of this, you think there's going to be an increase despite the fact that the market is, I mean, the market value that came in at June 30th has got to be pushing out the value that was there in, 2008? So,
Yeah.
I mean, we've got to be making a pickup from all of that.
By default, your arc actually increases by a certain percent every year. Some places do a level loaded arc. Ours is escalating. But there was actually some additional disbursements last year that were unexpected, upwards of about $1 million. So I would guess it's probably going up. Actually,
Yeah, we expect
it
it's
is.
going to go up. It's not going to stay flat, so we've got to factor in. We just don't know what percent.
On the, get back to me on these schedules, because they show a number that, on here, that doesn't show it going up, so I'm just curious. I was looking at the actuary's long-range projection here, and
Hold on.
What I'm thinking about.
I know they smooth things out, but it gets me confused when they smooth. They don't use actual. But I know our funded ratio is dropping in
Well,
this year's
actually,
audit. some more, so I assume that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, if you go to like the police, you notice
Yeah.
how the arc goes up, 632, 696, 677.
Yeah, okay, so that's the one.
707, 716.
Gotcha,
And that was the one-time correction for,
yeah.
Even the town, you actually see it go down and then start escalating again.
Yeah, it goes down then up, so that's kind of going all over the place. On the Board of Ed side, it's kind of,
Board of Ed's almost, is pretty level.
yeah, there's, look,
They're 1.1 a year with slight decreases.
yeah, so theirs shouldn't be too bad. You should make sure you obviously, I assume they get the actuarial report, the full book there, so they can start looking at, especially when you do long-range planning, you can kind of see what they're talking about there. Talks about long-range budgeting, where it goes short-term, the changes, and long-term. You can see a trend, if you see a trend up or down. Right.
All right. Yeah, the one piece I wanted to talk about for a few minutes tonight was, the decline in enrollment, the projected decline in enrollment, and how that relates really to our overall budget planning. I know that last year, we had a projected decline, and it held pretty accurate for the first time in a couple years, down 76 students. And we were able to, last year in the budget process, reduce 10 certified positions. And I remember presenting to the Board of Finance early on and to my board and say that will be an important part of our planning process as we try to mitigate and control cost, is that we really take responsibility for kind of right-sizing the organization when we have the opportunity to do so. So our planning was to reduce those certified positions and, use our class size guidelines to keep our class size guidelines within our policies. What that allowed us to do last year was essentially offset the entire contractual increase. It was about, I think, like 1.2 million or 1.1 million. We were able to essentially wash that out in our initial planning process due to the reductions. So this year, when we do that same roll forward and we look at what our class size guidelines look like, we're not able to do that this year to that same extent. And I talked about the possibility of that happening last year. So we're projected to go down a little over 100 students, about 114 students. And when we look at where we'd be able to absorb certified FTE, and by that I mean classroom teaching positions in the initial planning phase, it looks like we can go down 2 certified positions probably at the elementary level. So a very different starting point for us this year in the roll forward than last year, because our contractual obligations, just rolling them forward, are 1.9%. So I feel like last year, just from a planning standpoint, we had a lot more flexibility out of the gate than we do this year. We saw, while we did come in at the projected number, we really saw an anomaly in terms of in-migration in 8th grade, of all places, in the district, with I think 32 new students. So we really have some pretty significant class size issues at Henry James Middle School this year. Classes of 28, 27, when the norm there has been 22 and 23 for several years. So one of the things we'll have to do is kind of right-size that in our planning as we move forward. We're projected to go down about 30 students, and I think with some slight additions, we can right-size those class sizes. But with the elementary enrollment kind of panning out a little bit, flattening out, and that bubble moving through the secondary, we just don't have as many places we can consolidate as we initially planned. So I just wanted, I talked about that a little bit last year, wanted to bring that up this year, that our starting point seems a little bit different. And 2 other things we're focusing on in this budget process, and it's very early, but those innovations in technology. Technology continues to change, so how do we ensure that our students and our teachers have ready access in technology, and how do we kind of plan for that and budget for that in a very thoughtful way. The third piece, just to bring up a little bit tonight, is special education transition programming. I know that last year we talked to the Board of Finance and our board and in the town meeting a little bit about our Ready, Set, Go program and the growth that program saw at the elementary level, which is a program that services the needs of our autistic children. That elementary bubble, we've seen some of those students now in the middle school, and we need to think about transition programs that really provide those students the services that they need and they deserve, so that the end result is that they stay in district and they don't end up in outplacements. So that's a goal of this budget process moving forward. So those are some significant drivers that we'll be talking about and developing as we move through the process and discuss with you.
I just want to
Sure.
understand two things. So I know last year you added several positions for the Ready, Set, Go program, and I just heard you talking about the middle school. Are you saying you're going to need even more special ed positions this year?
We may. Last year, we looked at our elementary program at Ready, Set, Go, which is K through 6, and we brought in somebody to kind of head up that program, head the charge from a leadership standpoint, and we also had funding in there for paraprofessional support. We may be looking at Henry James early on here in the planning process at an additional special education teacher, an actual classroom teacher, to right-size kind of the caseloads or the number of students that each teacher works with and manages their, they call them IEPs, their individual education plan time.
Okay. And the other question I had, and I'm sorry, it just didn't run over my head. Last year, you dropped 74 students or so, and you were able to cut 10 positions.
Right.
This year, you're going to have 114 students fewer, but only cut 2 positions. So
Right.
help me with that math again?
All right, so that math is a couple of things. It's not always equal across all levels, so that's the quick and easy. There's a distribution thing that last year, some of those just plain and simply fell right. Class size guidelines in third grade are a little higher than they are in second grade, and when those second grade cohorts went to third, we were able to kind of reduce consistently across the elementary school, so that's kind of a one and done deal. The second is because of the influx of students at the middle school, we're unable to take any additional FTE there. So it really has put us in a tough spot to talk class size. We had 5 classes at the middle school last year that were over the class size guideline. Right now we have 36. So we've really just seen a significant difference. At the high school, we've gone from 33 over the guideline to 66. So, we have really tried to use those guidelines and pare down where we could. And I think with some of the influxes in enrollment, we skinned it a little too close, and now we have some bubbles that we need to look at. That I don't think we'll need a whole lot of additional staff. I think it's more of attrition when the smaller cohorts come through and it'll right size a little bit.
Matt, on teacher retirements, do you have any handle there on how that works, or is that just kind of
Yeah.
arbitrary, or?
We we usually do an average. We have 5 solid right now that are in the planning process that will take the differential between the top level going out and like a step 5 or a mid-level coming in and
They've announced,
absorb that. So,
they've told you.
yes,
Yeah.
What did we have last year? Was that, we have about 10 or 11? Was that?
we didn't have that.
No, 2 years ago we
Yeah,
did.
we had fewer.
Oh, we had fewer last
Yeah.
year. Because usually, I have
No,
10
2 years ago we had.
Oh, that's when we had 2
larger.
years ago.
Yeah.
We had
Usually an
a
average
larger
about
number.
7 to 8 a year.
Yeah, so it's about an average. Okay.
Right. So those are offsets. Those will be offsets to a number, the potential 2 reductions, and then the retirement number.
Where do you stand at this point in your contract cycles, at least with the larger union groups?
We've got our certified staff. We've still got 2 years with that, and that's our largest. This year we have 2 groups that are expiring June 30th, and that's the SFEP, our clerical paraprofessional union, and a smaller group are nurses. Those are the 2 expiring.
So on the teachers, that contract is for the budget year we're talking about, and then 1 more year after? So that's got 2 years in a row.
What was the second? You said paraprofessionals
And the
and
nurses group,
how large is that group?
it's a little over 10 FTE, not quite 11 FTE.
And Linda, if I go back to one of the comments you made, your questioning around kind of class sizes and whatnot, I just wanted to compliment our administrative team, because every year they go through a very detailed planning process where they're looking at school by school, class by class, just trying to make sure everything is going to fit within those guidelines. Similarly, I think an excellent job they do in kind of assessing special ed needs. And I think it's done, and needs to be done at a very detailed level.
One of the things we're trying to do, and both boards did such a good job of it last year, was that savings, with the insurance. Mary mentioned it. You saved over $600,000, which was amazing. And without that, we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we did last year. But now the expectation's there. How do we replicate that? You know, and that's why it kind of got my mind going as to how do we get into savings areas? You know, and I know with Joe on board, he's got a fresh look at everything, and he's been rattling, I know, the cage in a lot of areas, trying to do some savings, but where do you see some savings? I know we've talked about a few things. Have you seen some areas where we can get some savings?
Some take longer than others, and some are opportunities. So we're looking at everything from technology, consolidating staffs for technology, looking at finance department back office functions and what we can do. So some of it is in the analysis standpoint, and then we'll be looking to implement how that works. So there's try to think. I think it's a little early to know, and Matt can chime in, but I think it's a little early to know whether any of these will be ready to go as of January 1st or the fiscal year, but there's certainly a lot of things that are in the works that could provide potential saving.
Burke, if you want to go over some of the things on the...
Well, I'd say in terms of the upcoming budget year, I think we've been looking along with the town and the Public Works Department on energy efficiency projects. I think that's probably one of the more promising areas. We continue to work closely on procurement jointly for energy. One of the areas we've done jointly this past summer was an RFP for energy management information system services. So they're helping look at all of the utility bill detail to make sure that everything is being paid to the accurate tariffs and seeing if there's not a little bit of savings that we can pick up there. Part of the benefit of that is we'll be able to have better data on the usage, and that will, hopefully help us improve efficiency further. I know the town's got some audit, telephone audit.
Oh yeah, we did very well on the telephone audit. They found upwards of $50,000 worth of savings. Fortunately, it looked like we were a little bit under budget on it in years past, but some of it, a good portion of it will bleed through to next year's budget.
And we're working with the Board of Ed on doing the same analysis on their side as well, so that might result in some savings.
Right. We've got an initial draft. I don't think we're going to be as large in terms of the potential savings, but once we have the final number, we'll share that.
I saw something in your minutes, Mary. I think it was the Selectmen's on Tom Roy. Mr. Roy had a proposal. Was that on? I think it was with Public Works and the town for some potential savings on whether he could commit to spend.
Oh, this is the wastewater project.
Is that what that is, the
through
wastewater?
CLMP,
Yeah.
as well as Public Works, yes.
Yeah, that's not ready to come forward, but
That's
there's
not
a
ready to go?
possibility of savings there as well.
Right. So there's a lot of
Things in the works that, as I said, it takes time to analyze and
Right.
put in place, but we had a lot of initiatives, joint initiatives that we're working on.
And if I could speak to a couple of those too, they may not necessarily go immediately to savings, but certainly to cost mitigation. We're working jointly with the Board of Ed staff on preparing for the Affordable Care Act, which is going to be a real challenge. The way it's shaping up for us is it's going to cost us money, and it's just a matter of what steps we can take to keep those numbers low, and that's going to be a combination of both staffs working hard on some of the information tracking and reporting requirements, which are new and are going to be very complicated to do. It's going to be a matter of collective bargaining, and I think Burke and I are in regular contact on what we're doing with proposals. We thought that the high deductible health plans were going to be the way to go, and there may be some challenges even with those. So it's still it's a moving picture, but we're working hard to make sure we're prepared for it. We're working together on looking for the best way to improve our human resources information systems. Both of us run very heavily paper-driven systems right now, which are cumbersome and probably result in missing things. We're going to try hard to use the Finance Plus programs that we can, but what we found is that in many cases those aren't as flexible or customizable as we need. So, but one way or the other, any solution we find for that will be found on a joint basis. And finally, another area I think where we're sharing a lot of our resources and is on the technology side, on the build out of fiber optic cable. As you all know, it's for the town side, we're finally able to access the Nutmeg network, which is something the school and the police department have been able to do for a while. But a lot of the capital investments we've made in that, we plan to make in that, should result in a much wider range of cost-saving options. But those will probably be downstream a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad Tom mentioned the technology because we were the first town to take advantage of the Nutmeg network. So it's through the grants that we aggressively sought through CROG that enabled us to get those savings. So those will also result in savings down the road.
Tom, the Affordable Care Act insurance issues you were talking about really we're talking out a couple of years now. I mean, it's not going to impact this year's budget too much.
That is correct, Nick.
Yeah.
We have the Cadillac tax, which is the
2018, isn't it?
Correct, and that's the 800-pound gorilla in this whole
Yeah.
thing. But there's a lot of it's just hard to know how that's going to play out, and a lot of what keeps happening is the strategies that one finds for preparing for it are sort of gutted before you even really have a chance to let them go. And that's, for example, we've heard now that employee contributions into the health savings account may actually count towards the cost of the plan, pushing it up over the Cadillac tax thresholds. So, and if that's going to be the case, then we're going to have to consider some other and unfortunately more dramatic steps. But the good news is that we now have people on board who really understand this stuff and are looking at it closely, and both teams are working hard. The record-keeping piece is going to be very tough. I don't think when our friends in D.C. pass these requirements, they have any clue about how hard they are to do. But we're working hard to make sure we're ready for them. Other than that, you're right. There have been a couple of little taxes that they've imposed on us already, but nothing that would shake the budget too badly.
I would assume, though, if we're going to see anything in this budget cycle, it would be for systems improvement.
That's
Yes.
correct.
So we probably expect to see something in the capital non-recurring along that line.
That's right, Peter.
Gotcha.
Can I ask about, you mentioned something about payroll, and
Here's how much.
Nick could probably address this better than me, but I've heard through the grapevine that our payroll is still very paper-driven, and we're practically writing individual paychecks.
That's exactly right. And
So why aren't we using ADP or any of the many other companies that can do it in a much more efficient?
that's exactly what we're looking at, Linda. But part of the problem is that we have, both of us, very highly customized situations. It's not, there are a lot of programs out there that we might be able to get that we'd end up working for the program as opposed to having the program work for us. The other thing is getting something that'll interface well with our finance software. So
Doing that jointly, presumably.
exactly, and they've been using some resources for a while that that exist with Finance Plus that we're studying now. But I
So it
think
takes time to parcel out if you take away the payroll function, even if you contract out, there's still staff needs
exactly.
that remain, so we need to figure
Right.
out what those are.
I think we each have exactly one person doing a payroll input, and that, no matter what we do, is not likely to change. It's just, but it is ridiculously paper-driven right now.
But it is something that we're working on.
On insurances, with the medical insurance account where we have a surplus there, the use of that, and I know I asked this last time, when we set the rates, try not to build it up or to use it. And tell us what you think you're using it for, so in our minds, we understand that, because if we're, looks like it was a small use of it this past year. But I want to make sure we use that. First of all, we calculate it, and my unofficial calculation is about 2.5 to 3 million, but I'd like to get a formal calculation where we do that this year, we feel comfortable, an amount to have, and then anything in excess, how are we going to use that?
Sure.
And I'd like to have a prudent, reoccurring way, and my method is just a simple 10% of the excess. and then you'll never get sticker shock or budget shock, but at least you could get $200,000 to $300,000 in savings somewhere in the budget. So if we use some simple principles, but just make sure we get the savings, and you show us that, because I'm going to ask where they are, because if you don't have them in the cost side, we'll budget it on the revenue side.
Perfect.
We'll get them somewhere. I just want to make sure we get them. So, because I know sometimes the consultant sets the number, and he's not thinking the same way we're thinking. And I know when we questioned him, I'm not sure he was on the same page we were on. So whoever communicates, we want to make sure we get that savings there, because it could be a good number.
Are there restrictions on that? Are there restrictions on that in terms of where the 10% is directed? I thought we were looking at whether it had to be directed toward benefits.
Talking about the reserve?
Yeah,
Restrictions on the reserve.
Right.
Well, keep in mind, it's essentially our money, and
Right.
we're in a self-insured plan. So it's really a question, and Tom and Burke, you opine on this as you know, if I'm messing this up, but it seems to me what we need to do is to sort of try to set a better 3 or 5 year rolling smooth rate of what we charge ourselves in order to make sure that the fund is adequate, but as Peter is suggesting, make sure that it's not building up to the point where we sit there and say, gee, we're essentially overtaxing ourselves.
I think that's something we can work on. There is, just to drop back a step, there are some limitations on what we can do. We really does need to, and remember that we do have employee contributions going into this as well. So it's something where we're going to need to keep it directed that way. But I think to some extent we have successfully used that fund balance to keep our rate increases from going crazy in the past.
Well, I think what we want to avoid is, and Peter, you've been on this board longer than I have, but was it 10, 12 years ago? We gave ourselves like a $600,000 break in terms of the charges that we...
We did a premium holiday where we didn't pay 1 month.
Yeah, so...
Right.
2 months.
That was fairly
We
recent.
did a...
It was 2013.
Yeah.
Well, we
No,
did it a long
I'm
time
talking
ago.
about
No, it was
a long
before
time
that.
ago.
Before that, we
Way
Did it
back.
again in
For that.
did do it in 2013.
Because there was,
But what we want to avoid is doing too much
Right.
and then having to come back and
Right.
say,
Right.
gee, you know, we...
Need to, right.
So,
Last year was unique with the carrier
right. that was-
consolidation process. We lost a lot of the administrative service fees, but we didn't know adding a third plan, how that was going to play
Right.
out. And we have seen very good migration into that, around 17, 19%, I think, in
But like 10
here. So
10
we
years
should
or
have
so...
a better sense now going forward of how that is likely to impact the
And
process.
things are stabilizing with the consolidation, so at least from that standpoint, I think we can be a little bit more predictive.
I mean, 10 years or so ago, we gave like a fairly sizable break to the employees who were paying in, and so...
And
That was a long time
the
ago.
reserve went away very, very quickly.
It
Yeah.
did, yes.
Well, we had some bad experience, too.
Yeah.
You can lose $1 million with bad experience real quick, so
Very quickly, yeah.
that's why we have to keep adequate reserves. On the capital, if you obviously we're going to go through the capital process, too. We're not doing that tonight, but you should just we'll just hand out last year's capital.
I removed fiscal 15,
I did, okay.
so it's only...
So just for people's information, here's what was on the list for last year. I mean, obviously, it goes through your 2 boards before it comes to us, but just work out your capital and stay within our guidelines, and life is good. Life is good. But it's all we ask, and...
Matt, I know that over the last year or 6 months or so ago, you did a study at the for the Board of Ed on whether it was possible to close school.
Right.
I know you've made the decision that you're not going to do, or you're not recommending that at this point in time.
Right.
But does that study give us some idea of a time frame where that becomes an issue again, that we ought to be looking at it?
The year we kind of targeted and looked at was 2018-19, because that's, as accurate as projections go. shows when our elementary enrollment would stabilize. So
And that's the key element, is when it sort of
looks like it
plateaus?
flattens out, and then as we've removed all this temporary space, the modular space, we're set to remove probably Central this year. You know, how does our capacity look relative to those numbers? So when we looked at each of the scenarios and we actually went through each of them mathematically, the only one that would even be feasible from a logistics standpoint was Terrafil. And the conversation quickly turned to the recent project not being closed, the amount of money that paid back in state grants, outside of any other factors that would go into the conversation. So we agreed, though, to continue with our committee to come back on an annual basis, relook at the numbers, because we know the volatility in the numbers, and kind of reassess on an annual basis where we are.
And how often do you do the really in-depth sort of forensic look at what's going to happen to the school population? I mean, I'm sort of guessing at some point we start getting a baby boom from the millennials and so forth, that presumably will start growing the population at some point.
We haven't seen that yet in the projections, and we do a deeper dive every year. We roll over and kind of take a look at it, and it goes out 10 years with a quick warning that anything beyond 5, when you're dealing with actual birth rates, becomes very unpredictable. So, I mean, we have pretty solid data on that on an annual basis.
Well, capital is just for people's information, and when you look at it, what we're attempting to do here tonight is just have a preliminary discussion. People have any questions, or any board to ask any board how they think, why we do what we do, just ask it. You know, and we try to be open on how we think our board, because ultimately, you know, we start formulating our opinion on the budget as we go through this process. You know, we obviously look at ability to pay, what we feel. I look at what the seniors can pay. We look at what other towns are going on. We like to listen to compelling reasons, you know, commitments. So we're trying to keep our ears and our minds open to go through this process. But eventually, as we start getting more data, we'll narrow it down. I mean, our board can do one of three things. We can give you an exact number, we can give you a range, or we can just listen and not give you anything and see how we like it at the end. So we've done all three over my tenure of 18 years on here. I don't think this is one where we're going to give you a number. I don't feel there's any emergencies out there, or, you know, we've done that when we've digested a large debt issue, or we're in a real financial crisis. We might get harder with a number. I assume our board will probably talk about a range. And we talked about a range last time. We had a number with a range. We'll probably, I'm not going to speak for our board, but, you know, next month we'll be talking about that, and what our board feels comfortable doing, we'll explain to you or communicate to you. You can come in and listen to the conversation, but this meeting is just to let everyone know how we think, some of the thought process we go through. It's pretty simple. You know, we got to look at the revenue. We got to make it balance. We can't do any crazy things to make the budget balance like other agencies can, but here it, you know, we have to.
You're not talking about the state, are you?
Don't get me going on that.
My question, I guess, for Mayor, you had mentioned the governor's rescission. Is that all impacting us on the BOS side only, or also Board of Education?
Board of Ed,
Primarily Board of Ed, is that the bigger chunk?
yeah.
So, again, we don't know what that amount is, 'cause that maybe answers my next question, which had to do with where we are kind of year-to-date on the Board of Ed budget, and whether you thought you might be able to avail yourselves of that 10-248A account feature that's authorized by legislation, where you can hold money over. What is the percent on that again, Peter?
You can only hold up to 1% of your
1%.
budget,
Yeah.
but I don't think they'd have that much.
Yeah, that won't be a problem. Staying under-
That's a good number.
Yeah, it's usually too early to tell. I mean, it is another pretty close year,
true.
is what I'm seeing so far. And Matt mentioned earlier, we've got continued concerns about special ed outplacements and some of those situations where we need an additional staff support. Someone has moved into the district, then our The ability to budget is difficult for some of us.
You know,
I
last
think there's
year-
a chance that we could take advantage of it. I just don't know to what, that it would be to any great extent.
And is there anything that you need to do to set that up, as the Board of Education reviewed that and established it? Yeah, I don't know.
I think what it has to do is they have to probably recommend it, our board has to formally adopt it, so they can use it. Unless we adopt it, they can't use it. So we can adopt it and you can choose not to use it, or you can choose to use it. So we'll probably explore that if you don't mind.
Yeah.
We can bring it forward.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah, you guys can look into it and make suggestions, and, I think more towns it's only been out there a few years, and more towns are trying to understand it, what it is. So that's why I bring it to your attention, I think it can be a positive if you use it right. It's meant to be
Yeah, I see
positive,
that also.
and I see it as a positive opportunity for your board, so you should look at it and ask us to consider it.
Okay.
And, but I
We'll do
think
that.
legally, the Board of Finance has to set it up so they can do that, restrict the reserve.
But I can't see any reason why we wouldn't.
Right, I can't either. But
I just was thinking among the budget drivers might be, for example, I don't know how much it costs to heat the schools, and we're seeing oil prices declining. We've can hope for a mild winter and not a lot of snow removal, but obviously that's unpredictable. But I don't know whether, for example, you're seeing certain line items that are trending in a positive way by a significant amount.
In terms of that particular area that you're speaking of, the town and Board of Ed participate in regional bids, but those are fixed prices, so this is the rare instance where,
We get
a fixed
dinged by-
price doesn't
okay.
necessarily work in our favor, but it's a better feeling when the prices are going up.
Right.
So we won't be able to anticipate, savings on those.
how
falling
often do you
prices of oil.
fix the prices, Burke? When?
They've been annual. In fact, for the upcoming year, they've given us new pricing to try to lock in for the following year. It's very, very early that we've received that this year. So that's something that Tom, Roy, and myself are the representatives to that entity, and we'll be deciding whether we want to lock in.
And the town does it different ways in the past, and predictably, if we lock in, the price goes down. If we don't lock in, the price goes up. Heard how it works.
Right.
I think the
Let us
total
know which one you
Murphy's
choose.
Law.
price drop is still working through the pipeline, so
Yeah.
Just flip it.
Pipeline.
get your crystal ball and figure out where the low is. But
On the electricity end, the Board of Ed was on a different cycle than the town and participated in a regional bid, and we were glad to lock in that instance, given what we're seeing.
Right.
Matt, the task force that you had also looked at the savings and shutting down the modulars.
Right.
So that's, and I didn't hear you mention that earlier, but that's something we'll be looking for as a potential savings even in next
Right.
year's budget again, I think.
If we go forward with the central piece. Yep.
Have we built in the impact of the other shutdowns already?
Yes,
Those-
those were already budgeted for in the current year. We took the second phase. Yeah.
How many do we still have that we're operating?
We have on Central School, Terrafil as well, but Terrafil needs to stay. We will utilize that space, continue to utilize that space. So just, we're down to Central Schools.
For some reason, I thought we were out of them at this point, but
No. Moved Tooten 2 years ago and Latimer
Latimer
Lane last
last
summer.
year.
you went out on eBay and sold them for humongous amounts of money,
We
right?
tried to
Tried.
sell
Oh,
them.
God.
I see St. Mary's puts them in.
Yeah, it's
Would they-
probably easier to bring something in that's rolls easily on
Yeah.
a trailer than to try to pick up something and move it somewhere else. And I think that's what we found. But we did have interest the first year from one of the nonprofit schools, but that they determined it wasn't going to be financially advantageous for them.
They're pretty old.
Those prior to were, Central's a little bit
Central's
newer.
a little bit
so
better
we'll
shape.
Trailers?
see.
Yeah.
For the most part, they're junk.
Oh, yeah.
Another thing that I think was handed out was, we just put in the piece that pertains to the budget, but we just have the dates that we're trying to lock in when the presentations are to our board. So you have like 4 dates there, the Board of Ed budget presentation to the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen budget presentation to the Board of Finance, and we're gonna have a public hearing about the operating and capital. I assume the capital's being presented, Board of Ed goes to the Board of Selectmen, and they present that on March 31, when they present their operating, they're to present the capital budget to us that same night. And then we'll have a public hearing. We can have 1 or 2 public hearings on that. Last year we did 1, and then we had opened our meeting up to another public hearing on it, and then passed it on to the voters, to the referendum, and we have the referendum date here if it follows that schedule, so.
By charter, you only have to have 1, though.
Right. But sometimes we open it up if there's
Well, we've got
any issues.
we've got 2 on the.
We got 2 on the docket,
Yeah.
on ours, but we didn't put them on this week, but there is 2, in case we have to talk about it twice, but if there's no reason to, we won't. If there is, we will. So if there's enough concern from the public, we'll discuss it, and if something controversial comes up, we'll talk about it. So that's for your information. Later on in this meeting, our board has to adopt our timetable for next year. Otherwise, they're all special meetings if I don't get this thing adopted. So, but do note, we're going to change the time of our meeting to 5:45 unless it's noted.
Okay.
Now, on 2 of these, the time is noted. The hearing is going to be at 6 o'clock at the amphitheater, the public hearing. But all our meetings are going to be 5:45 if we adopt that time. That's what we talked about last time. So we're going to start a tad earlier and then obviously the one after the referendums, after the polls close and we know the results. So can't have that meeting until we know the outcome. That's when we set the ultimate mill rate on May 5th. I just hope we have a good process. I'm looking forward to it. I thought last year was a good outcome. I was delighted with the outcome. I never thought we'd be able to have hold the mill rate or even a decrease. If we get the right scenario this year, we could maybe do it again. That'd be nice, but it's going to take work on all our parts. That's why we're looking for savings. We're asking everyone to try to, everyone be respectful of each other's goals, and I know what you got to do. We got to be respectful of what you're doing, and on the Board of Selectmen, listen to compelling reasons. So on all the boards to just listen to what the other boards have, what they have to face, and we're all in it together. We're trying to get a good outcome for the taxpayers. So if we approach this with a team effort and look for savings, or maybe we can be a little creative, and many ways to get some results. So use us as best we can. We just want everyone to talk and communicate, and I'd appreciate it. And does anyone have any more questions while we're all here? All right. Our board has to do 2 items of business, if you don't mind. You can stay. You're willing to stay and listen to us. If not, we'll have to listen to our finance director and how the audit's going, and we have to approve our calendar. Joe, why don't you?
I just have to be out here.
Why don't you give us? Do you have a finance director's report?
Yeah, sorry. Obviously, I just did this 10 minutes ago.
Okay.
Sense,
Oh, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
How's the audit going?
Yeah, this is got people talking.
All right. There you go, Joe. Same for next year.
All right, shortest one I've actually put together. Audit, you guys are going to be done in the next 10 days. Right now, the pacing item is GASB 67. It's a new accounting standard. Seems like a lot of finance directors are having a tough time getting this one done. It's actually in the actuaries' hands, but it's the actuaries and the auditors that aren't seeing eye to eye. But having said that, it'll still be issued within 10 days. The expectation is general fund change on a budgetary basis is going to be 0. GAP's a little bit different, but all in all, it's a good year. You guys appropriated about $2 million. You guys were able to fix very large deficits in Simsbury Farms, appropriate $955,000 worth of capital projects. Very positive things that just reflect your guys' management style. All right, bonding. With the change in first selectman, I'm not going to bond in February, March. I'm not going to the rating agencies with a relatively new selectman until she's been in the position for a few months. Just so you guys are aware, because I know a few of you, this is your first time on the board. Before you go to market and issue your bonds, you go and you meet with rating agencies down in New York, where they essentially rate the health of the municipality. One of the things that they do look at is the management structure, and something like this could be negatively received, right? I mean, any kind of political upturn, they don't necessarily respond positively to. So what I want to do is give a couple months, let it settle down, and then, myself, Lisa, Tom, and if any of you guys want to come, we'll go down to New York, meet with the rating agencies. I see no reason for them to change our rating or our outlook. You guys have very strong fundamentals. You guys are doing a lot of items such as the fund balance policy, the investment policies, and year on year, you guys have had positive results. So, Simsbury Farms, this has been
So when are
another
you thinking of doing that?
bonding. April.
April.
You're not getting any indications that we're going to lose rate
No.
in that time frame? I don't think we will either, but.
What's funny is there doesn't seem to be a lot of municipalities issuing debt right now. Really not sure why. There just hasn't been a lot of offerings, but the rates that we've been seeing are right around 2%. I think I mentioned this earlier. There is an opportunity to do a refunding. That'll generate about $100,000 for the savings. We probably will wrap that in with this. You guys will obviously get your say on it. But it looks appealing. Although they sent over some funny stuff. All right, Simsbury Farms.
I'm sorry, Joe, I kind of missed the beginning of that sentence. What was going to generate $100,000 in savings?
Refunding. So
We'd take one of our older bonds and
We did that once before
Yeah.
in the high school.
I thought we had determined that there were none that were.
At that
at
point.
that time.
Right, okay.
So what happens is bonds have call dates.
Yeah, Sam, I know.
Okay, sorry. In West Haven, I had to explain everything, so this is a little different. Simsbury Farms, I'm meeting with Jerry tomorrow. We're going to try and finalize whatever analytics he's to provide to the board. We're going to meet as a subcommittee one more time before the next Board of Selectmen meeting, and hopefully there'll be some sort of recommendation. We kind of know the outcome on this. It's $90,000 is coming back to the Board of Selectmen budget. They're going to show, an increase in revenue and a decrease in expenditure. So far this year, on a year-on-year comparison through the end of November, they're actually $74,000 more favorable than they were. Well, not more favorable. $74,000 better off than they were last year.
So they've made some improvements.
Absolutely.
They already did some cost cutting.
It's all on the cost cutting. I think there's $3,000 or $4,000.
So they might not have to do, they're probably already there at the
That-
number we set.
That was part of the point that we tried to make to them, but
Yeah, I don't think they understood it, so we told them 50,000 in total, they probably done a good chunk of that already.
yeah.
But just in 2-year period, they need to.
Don't stop
No, no.
if there's more.
Yeah.
Well, we're
That
gonna,
account in place.
I volunteered Joe to go work with them.
What's
Does
that?
the 74 offset the 90?
No, the current year we're in.
No.
No. Remember, we
it's not a
still,
carry forward?
but we lost 190,000 this past 6/30/14, right?
Yeah, there,
185,
187.
187, so.
there was items that were pushed out of the general fund to that operating budget over the years, and it looked like it was right around 90,000. So that's kind of how we came back at that amount, because that was the topic of conversation. Well, the selectmen burdened us with an additional 90,000. Okay, that excuse is gone. So now they need to show results, right? Even though they were losing more than 90,000.
But cost cutting, I think they have some ways to go, and I volunteered Joe to work with them if they have trouble finding it themselves, so I'm sure he can help them. He's already found a few areas he showed me, and so I think if they put their mind to it, they can get some good results, and I might have to do a slight revenue increase here, or maybe if the economy turns, they'll get more play or more usage.
Yeah, and they seem to be pretty active. I mean, they're trying to put together a marketing plan. We'll see how it goes. In truth, guys, you guys have an absolutely beautiful golf course that costs next to nothing to play, with very nice facility for a municipal golf course. a pool, heated paddle courts that I told Joan we're gonna shut off.
No.
All right, and then,
You'd be nice.
no, honestly though, Nick, you guys heat your paddle court.
Yeah,
Of
course.
That's how you play. Everyone
And so
does.
that they don't ice up.
I'm sorry, no, that sounds rational to guys. This is great.
That's what you do.
Well, you can sweep.
You don't seem to be out there in August playing, do
Well,
you?
you do both.
This is entertaining.
Cheaper than heating,
You have a lot to learn.
cheaper than heating sidewalks throughout town.
We're going on a little field trip.
Do we do that anymore?
Are we gonna heat crosswalks? All right. Long-range planning, guys, this has been me, but I was fortunate enough that Barbara came, paid me a visit today. Made considerable progress, so I'm gonna try and meet with a few of the individuals, specifically Barbara, Lisa, and,
You mean Linda?
sorry, and, Linda and Lisa, I apologize. It happens from time to time. Before
those L
a
wings.
January meeting, so in January, I will pull everyone together and we'll actually get going, but I made considerable progress today. So I thank Barbara for that. And Linda thanks you too, I think.
Now, on the audit, make sure I get the preliminary draft so they don't issue some bad footnotes like they did last 2 years. So I want my crack at them.
We need to look.
They've already said that they have to give the audit that they already gave to me another cursory overview before I can get it to you.
This is clearly just a case of the person who writes the text isn't the one who should be reviewing it. They needed another set of eyes on it,
Yeah.
that's all.
I will tell you, as of late, they've kind of impressed me. I definitely didn't start off that way, but they're pretty good. They seem pretty knowledgeable. They have a lot of history with the town. They've definitely helped me out.
They do.
'Cause it seemed like everything we turned over was a restatement going all the way back to 2010, and we'd muddle through it. It was fun.
And we ferreted out all the issues. I mean, they went through the capital.
Yeah, the capital
We
looks a
paid
lot
them.
better. We definitely understand it. We closed out a lot of the old encumbrances that were just hanging balances all over everywhere. Am I gonna say that we've cleaned up everything? Absolutely not. I'm not gonna give an absolute. But I would say we got rid of a good portion of the issues that I saw. Haven't found many bad guys, just a couple here and there.
Okay.
Mostly good guys.
Well, good. Now, one thing we do have to do is the schedule, we have to adopt the schedule. Now, if people speak now, forever hold your peace on this. This is just a meeting schedule that we post that are regular meetings. If we want to change, we can throughout the year. This is not absolute, but we have to call it a special meeting. So, traditionally, we pass now and post this schedule for the next year. I know some people had mentioned before they had problems with Thursdays, but
Yeah,
we didn't hear,
And we changed the March 12th meeting to the 11th. The only one I couldn't change was April 9th,
Why couldn't you change that one?
because of the way that it fit with the dates of your asinine charter. Pardon my French.
The Thursday, April 16th works for me, but not the 9th.
Oh, I'm sorry, I see it in there twice. I apologize.
well, no,
Back-to-back Thursdays.
There's a possibility that Thursday's now going to be a problem for me too,
Which one, the 16th or the 9th?
the 9th.
The 9th is the more important one.
the ninth.
Can you move the 9th to the 16th? I mean, do we need both of
Well,
them?
And now without moving the date back, I think on the charter issue that he's speaking to, the whole election.
The problem is we have to approve it that night, the budget. If we can go and approve it that night, we can, because we're not going to approve the budget till the 16th. So if we want to have a public hearing and then sit there and go with it, because we have to move it on that night or move something on. No later than the 16th, right?
Correct.
That's a drop dead deadline.
Otherwise,
And that's the
then
school
you can't do
vacation
the
week,
9th.
too.
Yeah.
That's not the one we both have a potential problem with, it's the 9th.
When school vacation week start? Friday?
All right.
You'll just have to meet without us.
Right. Well, I don't know for sure, but there's a chance now.
There's no vote on that night, but that's the night that the public
Yeah.
will issue the
And
issues.
why, we can't do it the 7th? That kind of Tuesday?
Yeah.
I don't think it fit within the days.
Tuesdays
or that
are
was-
cleared for me, but,
What's the only question of 2 days?
No, it was literally like not less than 14 days or greater than 15 days.
Seriously?
Oh, you read your charter.
No,
It's
I know that, but I
ridiculous.
didn't realize it was 14. and-
I don't know, I'm shooting from the hip, kid.
You mean from May 5th, is that that's where we work back from?
Backwards.
Yeah, you work
Right.
backwards. All right, so that's fine. If we want to just not have the April 9th on this calendar, I can try and find another day, and then we can call
Well-
a special meeting.
Here's what we can do, we can approve this as is, and then
And then
work
see if
on
we-
changing that, make that
Yeah,
a special
that's fine.
meeting. Does
That's
that,
fine.
that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
And then we know we gotta work on that one to get it a better meeting.
So moved.
Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Nick?
Well, the only concern I've got is we need to do this reasonably soon so that, I mean, we're talking about notifying the public and
Right.
scheduling the amphitheater and all that kind of stuff. I mean.
well, if Joe
and-
can just look at the
Yeah,
dates
I
and
understand.
email us
Yeah.
all and see if the 7th works.
One of the issues I know with the 7th was that's the regular Board of Ed meeting night. That was, I think that was part of the
That's
whole.
why we didn't do it on
this whole
Tuesday.
dance here, yeah.
How about the 8th, the Wednesday? Was that
But if it's a
same-
Board of Ed meeting night, I mean, what we're doing is having a Board of Finance public hearing, so does,
They have to be
I wanna
there,
say-
they have to be there? Oh.
they have to do a presentation.
Oh, of course.
Why do I
yes.
remember the
Silly
date
me,
was
of
either the
course.
9th or the 10th? Do you remember that?
Well, the 10th's a Friday.
I know that.
They can
Yeah,
do-
Sean walked us through this because he was the
Yeah, he was,
guru of this.
he still had shell shock from it.
And
Can we do Monday?
what was the Wednesday conflict?
I don't remember.
How about a Monday or Wednesday?
It was Wednesday, that's not Ash Wednesday, no.
Wednesday the 8th might be possible. If that works as a
I don't think, last Wednesday's not.
Yeah,
a
8th's okay.
If
holiday.
8th, it's all right, yeah. Can we pass this with
The understanding.
With the
that we're-
understanding that if they can make the 8th work, he can substitute it in? Is that
Yeah.
legal to do that?
So if Barbara
All my,
changes
uh,
her,
Well, I still may, I have 2 different conflicts that
Oh.
week, so I'm not sure I'll be in state.
Okay. Now, technically, we don't have to vote on the budget till the 16th.
Right.
My preference is to not vote on it that night, to listen, think about it, and not be forced into a decision. I like time, I'm the
Yeah,
3-day rule
to
guy, that I
cogitate.
don't like being forced into anything.
And I can get home and hear the tape from them
Yeah,
Yeah, then you get home and then we can pass it on the 9th. So if you can't,
on the 16th.
on the
you mean?
16th.
yeah, 16th, I mean, I'm sorry, yeah.
so if Barbara wants to amend her motion to approve the calendar as is, but with a substitute for the 8th, for the 9th,
Yep.
Possible.
if that's possible, I would second that.
Okay, so I just check and see if the 8th is available.
Yeah, that's fine. I amend my motion.
Is Good Friday the 10th?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we pass it. All right, we're done. Thank you.
One thing I do have to note to you guys, in January, we're doing renovations down in
late
the main
because-
meeting room.
To back out of my
I
garage,
tentatively,
and the door
well, actually,
wouldn't open.
I've locked up the
I
library.
ended up having to go get my husband's keys.
Library?
His car.
Post that.
Well, actually, like 15
Wasn't able to
minutes
get this
before I
one.
left.